Yes, I hear you.
Hello from everybody.
Hi, how are you?
Now we saw Laura's video, but I think we're just going to have to assume that she's still there so that we can start the meeting and get on. So yeah, all right, great. Welcome everybody. I'll be mostly looking at colleagues in the room here, but
Yeah, that's fine.
This is unprecedented in the history of this current NAPLE board, that we've actually physically met. We had a meeting, I think, in Athens. Some people met. I wasn't there, but I think it was more of an informal get together. Yeah. Laura needs to come back. Just wait for Laura to come back in. Obviously, every word I say is precious, so I don't want to. Don't want to miss out. Anyone, we shouldn't miss out on my spiel. No. Hi, Laura.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, yes. Excellent, excellent. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. And everybody's very welcome. So we're sitting here in the National Library of Luxembourg. We have, well, in a minute we'll go around the table so that everybody can introduce each other. But this morning we've had a tour of the library, and we're currently in a small theatre style room, and we've all kind of moved down to make a mockery of that room by sitting around a table down the front here. And just on the other end of the corridor, the Oblida sort of General Assembly meeting is taking place. So already there's quite a few librarians in the building. I think they said there's 120 registered for tomorrow's conference session, which is good. So I think it's fair to say that physical meetings are back. They've been back for some time now, which is why it's nice that we can all be here together. Alice is taller than I thought. I think but isn't that's a kind of thing, right? When you meet people after all this time, people are shorter, taller, you know, like didn't think you were like that. So Alice looks quite shocked that I've said that.
Because I'm not one of the biggest guys.
Yeah, well, I don't know. You just I've only ever seen you sitting down, you know. So I don't know. But anyway, we're here. So we have an agenda which we've shared for the meeting. Was there somebody in the room who's going to volunteer to take sort of notes? Barbara, that's really kind. That's really kind. So what we'll do is we'll record this. Any super committed NAPLE member, therefore, is welcome to watch it back at their leisure. But actually, it's quite useful for the notes if we need to go back and clarify anything. So we do have colleagues from Spain and from Finland remotely. So what I'd like to do just before we start is to go around the room and remind ourselves of who we are. I'm Stuart Hamilton. I'm the head of Libraries Development at the Local Government Management Agency in Ireland. That basically means I'm in charge of the National Public Library Strategy. And for the purposes of this meeting, I will be your chair as the current chair of NAPLE. Sorry.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sander van Kempen. I work at the National Library in the Netherlands, and I'm part of a department that focuses on public libraries and their policies, etc.
Very good.
Good afternoon. My name is Geert Wiedens. I work for the Flemish Ministry of Culture Department, Culture, Youth and Media, and I follow public libraries and also special library services for people with special needs.
Can I just stop there and ask, were you able to hear it okay? Just otherwise you have to shout from the back. This is the back, but I think we're good, so that's okay.
Hello, my name is Arne Gundersen from Norway. I work in the National Library in Norway in the Department for Library Development.
Hi, I'm Isabella Corres. I'm working in the National Library of Poland, and I'm dealing mostly with Libraries Development Unit and library statistics, public library statistics, and all library statistics for Poland.
Hi, my name is Varana. Pretty much the same. I work in the National Library in the department which takes care of the network of the public libraries in the Czech Republic. And I'm also active in our association. I'm on the Orient committee or something.
Strong commitment to that.
Hi, I'm Joris Zeerlaerts. I work for the Department of Culture, Youth and Media in Flanders. And I'm a colleague of Geert.
Hello, I'm Elisabeth Rundqvist at the National Library of Sweden, National Corporations, which means library development mostly for the public libraries.
Hello, I'm Barbara Schleihagen from the German Library Association.
And hello, I'm Aleš Klemen from Ljubljana City Library in Slovenia. I'm deputy director in the library and responsible for international cooperation and working with the Slovenian Library Association, Slovenian Public Library Association.
Very good. So for the purposes of the meeting, I've had apologies from Isabel Hunter, who's on holiday, and Pamela Tulloch in Scotland. Isabel Hunter's from Libraries Connected in the UK, and Pamela is from Scotland. And that's an interesting thing about NAPLE, actually. I don't see it in too many other organisations, but the UK is actually split. England and Wales is with Libraries Connected, and Scotland has its own Scottish Library and Information Council. And then Libraries Northern Ireland as well is the fourth party puzzle. Mikkel Christofferson, who is the leader of our ebook working group, is in Luxembourg, but is currently in a very bad mood because his luggage was lost after a horrible flight cancellation. So he's not coming. Although we have invited him for a drink afterwards. See if we can cheer him up. So he might come. And I think that's maybe the apologies for the moment. Before we begin, I do want to thank for the record Jean-Marie from the National Library of Luxembourg, who's been really great in hosting us here. And I'm sure.
Shouldn't
Well, yes. Yeah, we thought you were just the audience. Mitra, do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Yes, my name is Mitra Kaurinkoski, and I'm working at the Ministry of Culture and Education in Finland. And I'm actually standing in for Lena Aaltonen, who maybe you know from previously, who works with public libraries, and she's on a leave for 6 months, so I'm standing in for her. So it's a pleasure to see you. It's a pity I couldn't be there with you, but
it's great you're joining us, Mitra. That's great.
Yeah.
Laura, do you want to come in?
Hello, my name is Laura, and I come from the Ministry of Culture and Sports here in Spain, and I'm the head of the Library Coordination Department here. So yes, we work also with public libraries.
Very nice to meet you. And Diego.
Yes. Hi, I'm Diego Gracia. I work with Laura in library cooperation in Spain, in charge of international cooperation. So.
Perfect. And we're going to hear from Diego further down in the agenda. I'll try and stick to what I've actually written down here, which is like include remote participants in introducing themselves, but I ignored that. Okay, so we do have the agenda. We have any other business as the last item. Is there anything anybody would like to add or at least check that we're going to discuss under any agenda items? Is everybody comfortable with the agenda?
Yeah.
And remote colleagues, I see nodding of the head, so that's all good. Then in that case, we'll get into it. As I said at the start of the meeting, we have until 5:30. So I think we'll just see how things go. Maybe we might want to stretch our legs or get up just before we have our open sort of discussion, see if there's any coffee anywhere or something like that. We'll find out. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to give a sort of chair's report of what we've been up to during the period of the board. We're going to hear reports back from our working groups. We're going to hear from Diego and the Sister Libraries program. We're going to talk about the election of the next board. and I sent an email around about that very recently. We're going to talk a little bit about the cooperation we've got with PL 2030 and Ablida, the EU work plan for culture, and then an open discussion on what we want to do in the next board term. In reality, I suspect that the cooperation item and the work plan for culture item might begin to get rolled into the future direction discussion. And so we'll just see what we've got to say as we come along. And already today I've had good discussions with Sandra and Elizabeth about some of the things we might discuss and when we have that last item. So
there's also the report on the NAPLE communication.
Yes, so that's after point five. Thank you, Sandra. That's great. What I did on the plane yesterday was make an annotated agenda for myself, which has confused me quite considerably. I'm writing under each agenda item, so I missed that one. But we'll do that one, and Alice will talk to us about the communications. I suppose one of the reasons why I got sort of confused was I was trying to put together a chair's report, and I suppose at the annual business meeting we would generally look at the previous 12 months. But I decided I wanted to really kind of reflect on the 3 years that we've constituted this board. And I pretty quickly discovered that we'd done quite a lot of stuff that I couldn't keep track of, which I think is quite positive, but I had to keep diving into my email to discover which meeting was doing what. And I was reflecting that actually when we kind of, if you remember, we actually revised the statutes in 2020. And I think my feeling is that kind of gave us a really nice base to work off of for the last 3 years, because it wasn't as if NAPLE had sort of stopped functioning, because it certainly hadn't. It's just that maybe it needed a little bit of impetus to sort of, or find a focus. And I think what we did was we reviewed the statutes. They were adopted at the General Assembly in 2020, and then we constituted this new board. Laura in particular, I think and Mitro, for the last 3 years on the board, we've had Anna, Barbara, Alish, myself, Franziska Betke from Switzerland was on the board, and she moved to a new position after about 1.5 years and was replaced by Isabella, which was great. Isabella we co-opted. And we've had Bruno from Portugal on the board all this time, but poor Bruno suffered a sort of health setback very close to the beginning of his term, I think. Yeah. So we've been sort of we held his seat, and most recently he's rejoined us, which is really great news. And he was going to be here today, and he's the final apologies that we had, because unfortunately traveling is still a little bit tricky. So he may arrive remotely or not. But we constituted that board, and under the new statutes we sit for 3 years. And then from that board, the board elects the chair or the president. We kind of use the two terms a little bit interchangeably. I think in the statutes it's actually president, but we use both, and that was myself the last 3 years. And we started along those lines, and really COVID was going, wasn't it? Yeah. So that was kind of really what was happening at the time. And I think that was when I started losing track of what we did in that first year, because actually
just COVID.
Yeah, it was just COVID, wasn't it? And the other thing that was a real change, I think, and I think this was really good for NAPLE, was that suddenly we started meeting online.
Yeah.
And that really, I think, has changed the whole dynamic. And I think
it was good for us.
I think it was really good for us, because I'm not really certain that if NAPLE was just an organisation that met once a year physically, there would be much for it to really be doing, to be really honest.
You promised me we will meet at least 1 or 2 times a year.
Yeah,
and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, I think I think I've stuck to that promise. I mean, I do think having this physical meeting is the one we have, right? This is the time to meet, and we might talk about the Ablida cooperation, because I wasn't previously involved with NAPLE. I know that some of you guys were, and I think it's always really been a NAPLE Ablida. We've met around the time of the Ablida meeting, and that does seem to be quite sensible, really, with the amount of crossover. But what I think was really good was this switch to online meetings. And I think we kind of just met when we needed to, didn't we, in the first sort of 6-12 months? And that was sort of every sort of 4, 5, 6 weeks at the start. And it was just COVID, and I think the combination of the online meetings and the fact that we were able, we all had a shared crisis in front of us, really, to my mind, gave a real focus to us. So the online format suited us, the information sharing suited us, and I think we've kind of carried that out of COVID and beyond really quite successfully. So against that sort of backdrop, this is what I remember us doing. Okay, so I figure you can fill in the blanks, but as a board, we agreed that we were going to meet sort of regularly, the sort of 6 of us, which we achieved. I think it's fair to say we've achieved that over 3 years, and I would like to think that lays down a real solid marker for the next board, and I think that will continue. And then we at the beginning we arranged members meetings in that sort of ad hoc style, but then we kind of moved to every 3 months, which seems to be good, but we can discuss that later on. And what we did was we put out a member survey at the beginning of 21, I think it was. So we'd already been meeting for best part of a year at that point, when we were actually, it wasn't like COVID had gone away, but we felt we had a little bit of time to sort of think a bit more strategically. And we put that members survey out, and we got feedback from the members about what areas we wanted to prioritize. And I was reviewing that on the plane, so it's quite interesting to go back and see that. So our number one sort of priority area was membership recruitment. So we might touch upon that in a minute. I'm not sure by our metrics whether we've been hugely successful, but I think we moved the needle slightly. The working groups, the continuation of the working groups, which I'll come on to in a minute, was another area. Communications was another area. And at the time of the survey, members prioritised COVID information sharing as being something we want to continue. The Sister Libraries programme and the cooperation between PL 2030 and Oblida. And then underneath that, we actually had quite a lot of other kind of ideas, which were sort of there sitting for us when we had the time and the capacity to look at. And I think maybe towards the top of that other list of ideas was library statistics, which we've kind of moved towards a few times in the last couple of years, but we've never quite understood precisely what it is we want to do. But I think that was good because it showed that we still, there was more topics out there for us once we had the capacity and the will. So what I think we might reconsider or consider as we move on through the meeting today is what we might want to do in terms of an update of that survey, or how we get members' feedback about the direction. Because what I think Anna particularly did was take the survey outcomes and we turned it into a work plan for the board meetings. So we actually have a set work plan that we go through, and we got the feedback from the members that was the way to go. So every 6 weeks when we meet, we actually go through that work plan and see where we are. So, I mean, Mikkel Christopherson always kind of jokes that NAPLE is the most loosely governed organisation he's ever been involved in. And that's by design, but actually we do still have that work plan, and we do still have a structure to have more of a loose sort of approach. There's plenty of other organisations to get involved in if you want really hardcore governance. That's what I think. So what I thought we might do is those priorities, I was just going to sort of go through and tell you what I think we've actually sort of done. Anna, I don't know if you got my email this morning
About the members.
about the members.
Yes, I did.
So Anna, somehow members came over to Anna's side of the house, and he's been the one trying to get the membership sort of aligned. So I asked Anna if he might say a couple of words about where we are with membership.
Well, don't have this much to say actually.
That's fine.
I sent out a members list prior to the meeting. I've received feedback from quite a few. Some have made some corrections to the list, which is fine. We have an email list that we use, which I think is well, quite up to date actually. So there are a couple of addresses there which belongs to people not really included in the list of NAPLE members. So we might just.
We could, I think let's put that on the table for discussion, yeah.
Yeah. But apart from that, there's nothing much to say. I think Alice on the website has a very good list of members and information.
So I looked at the, oh, go on. Alex.
No, we try to be up to date with the list of members, but sometimes it's hard to get the people who are coming after the people, the person who left their working place. For example, Switzerland. For Switzerland, we don't have another substitute for Francisca.
Right.
So this is maybe a problem. The problem is, of course, recruiting new ones to become members. We had some kind of campaign in Athens last year. We campaigned a lot. We talked with quite a few people, but it was not so successful.
I noted that during the 3 years of the board, I think we've added 3 members by my count. Libraries Connected in the UK weren't actually a member previously, so they came on board very much at the start of the 3-year term. And then Ukraine was added, and Georgia. So I think that's pretty good. At one point, we invited a colleague from Serbia to attend.
From Serbia, from Cyprus, from Montenegro. Sorry, from Romania. Romania. Of course, Romania. But from Serbia, but.
So I think we have 25.
Something like that, yeah.
But what I might do is because there's a few things we might want to pick up in a much more discussion sense, let's move this over to the future direction of NAPLE discussions, and we'll keep this in the chair's report. So over the 3 years, we've kind of expanded our membership. Well, that'd be 10%, but like in a small way. But the members that have been involved, I think, are active, which I think is the most important thing. I think out of that 25, I'd say 15 generally participate in each meeting and will respond if there's something on the emails. And I think that's all you can really hope for in some ways. So so that's a positive thing. But we might want to think again about expanding that when we get to the discussion.
I work on my Slovak colleagues. They ever contacted you because I gave them all the information, your email?
No, they didn't. And this is a free organization. You don't have to pay any money to join.
But you have to have an approval from some kind of government.
I mean, it's not easy. And actually, again, we might discuss this a bit further because Arna's also mentioned, on our mailing list, there are more people from Flanders, for example, and all this sort of stuff. And Mikkel Christoffersen plays quite a big role for us, but the actual Danish member is a different sort of. And if you look at that e-lending working group, it's people from our organisations, and Mikkel's mailing list is slightly outdated. Actually, if you ever hit reply all to his ebook thing, you get at least six back. So so I think we can discuss strategies for increasing when we come to our more strategic discussion. But as it is, basically, if you break down, Arna, your sheet is quite useful because you can see that we are a mixture of library associations, ministries, national libraries, and national and state agencies. And then there's a handful of slightly other types. So we public library in Slovenia, Switzerland is a kind of library for public libraries, and Libraries Northern Ireland is ever so slightly different to my organisation in sort of the Republic. But that was a useful exercise when we did break down that, because the approach we've been taking is that generally, if you fit into any of those categories, we'll welcome you into the fold. And I think the statutes kind of have the right language for that.
Maybe it would be good if we could see what countries are missing, since we have this overview. we could look at, for instance, I was just scrolling down and sort of struck me that France isn't participating.
Italy.
And Italy, for instance, big European countries that we could actively approach.
Yeah, I did try France for sure, and we've actually got 2 French members, one of whom speaking in the conference, Julie. So we might talk, but I approached them, and apparently the people that would be responsible in France are above them, and I think it's quite bureaucratic. So, but I agree with you. France and Italy are kind of glaring omissions in some ways, aren't they? So let's discuss that a bit further down. The second sort of priority I mentioned was communications, and actually we really have done amazing on that. I think we need to thank Alish in particular for that, because we turned that around very quickly, and we had a new website up and running within a week of saying, let's have a new website. So, you know, and I was looking at that this morning, and the new website has any existing strategies, it has the library legislation, and to be honest, that's the role of us, isn't it? So if you want to know about public libraries in Europe, we are the website that has that, and IFLA doesn't have that, and if LIDA doesn't have that, and it's quite easy to find, and it's really, really good. So we do have the communications update, and we'll hear a bit more about that, but I feel that as the members asked us to communicate on that, we really have done very well. And I think that's also connected to what I would say is kind of NAPLE's special sauce, which is the thing that we're really good at, which is basically information sharing. You know, we're not per se an advocacy organization. We're an organization to support each other in helping us make decisions. And when you think about, you know, what we did, particularly in COVID, which led to 2 reports, and I think a 3rd spreadsheet where we all reflected on lessons learned. That's pretty substantial information for anyone looking back at the period of COVID, and that all came out of us just having those members meetings and sort of email discussions. But I think, Anna, you've managed to record a few of the things that we discussed on the list over the last few years in the work plan. So this would be, we've discussed PLR contributions, library opening on Sundays, the Eurovision Song Contest, funding of public libraries per country, which was a really interesting piece of discussion that led to a Norwegian Journal article. A ban on access in libraries, which was in Sweden, customer service in libraries, citizen science, capital programs, which are something I came up with recently, and now national reading programs. So all of these have been and I probably missed a few, which is, you know, I was trying to go back and look at that. But I know that if I have a query, it's a brilliant list and a brilliant group of people to be able to get that back from. So I do think we've kind of almost excelled in the communications piece, which is what members wanted from us. The working groups we have separate agenda items for, so we'll touch that. But I think again that's been very successful, and want to carry on with those. Sister libraries, Diego is going to talk about in a bit. So again, we'll come back to that in a sec. And then I suppose also relating to the communications piece, the members' meetings themselves. So this is separate to the list. We did a lot of those on COVID, but I was looking at what we also did during the 3 years. We had a couple of meetings on strategy. We had the Scottish strategy presented. We had the UK or the Libraries Connected strategy. We had the Library Map of the World. We had a separate members meeting on that. We had the, do you remember the low Earth orbit satellite broadband meeting we did? So, and that's interesting when, I mean, that was a meeting we had prior to the Ukraine war, and now you can see that technology being used in Ukraine, the LEO satellites, and I think that's kind of interesting. We had a separate meeting on the Ukraine response, and most recently we did one on recruitment and retention. So it does seem like we did a lot on COVID, and we did, but actually we tackled a number of other topics, and I'd say that the you know, there's an open slate there for more topics as we go forward. We've done 2 annual assemblies. One, the NAPLE Forum in 2021, we did online with a keynote from Christian Larsen. Do you remember that? From Denmark on impact and evaluation. And we had a panel discussion on the direction of the sector. And we actually opened that up to people beyond NAPLE, and I think we had about 50 odd people on that one. So just as a kind of thing for us to think about when we get into the strategic discussion, I'd say there's a market out there for our topics in an online sense, because the Oblida group is a big crossover. And I was looking at the recording when I could see Giuseppe and I could see Tom and I could see everybody on there. And then last year we did do a NAPLE forum, but it was a bit more of a business focused meeting, although people were in Athens, obviously, there. So this will be the third annual assembly that we've had during the board sort of thing. So kind of wrapping up the chair's report, where do we find ourselves at the end of 3 years? Well, I think we certainly can say that we cemented NAPLE as an organisation that needs to continue, needs to be here. It's very useful. People have got a lot out of it. And I think the next 3 years are particularly interesting. And I think the main reason for that myself is some of the work that's gone on with our partner organisations, PL 2030 and Oblida in Europe. Because even though, as I said, we're not a doing advocacy organisation per se, the advocacy that they've done has opened up a space which is relevant to us. So particularly the EU Work Plan for Culture, but also, I don't know if you had a chance to read the Council of Europe guidelines that the Oblida team have worked on, and the library legislation piece, and also the work they've done on EU funding and sort of the availability. So I think there's plenty for us to get our teeth into in the next 3 years. There's other pieces. During our 3 years, the IFLA, for the first time, set up a European regional division, which wasn't in existence before. I'm also the chair of that. That's been quite challenging, to be really honest with you. Challenging because IFLA itself has had a very difficult 12-month period. But even regardless of IFLA's kind of board difficulties, the European Regional Division, what does it do? We already have NAPLE, we already have Oblida, we have LIBA, CENL, CEF. So it's a very crowded space. And there's probably still a bit of discussion to be had about the role of that. And actually there's a proposed satellite meeting prior to the Rotterdam conference where that question might be discussed in a bit more depth. So that's all going on. And there'll be a new IFLA governing board for the next 2-year sort of period. So I think NAPLE's well placed to deal with these next 3 years. Probably when we have our strategic discussion, we need to think about not overstretching ourselves. We don't have a secretary general. We don't have a we don't have any. The only resources we have is ourselves. So we need to be kind of clever about where we actually do things and not overpromise. But at the same time, if we didn't take advantage of particularly the EU Work Plan for Culture, we'd be missing a trick, I think. So we might want to think about that. And that is what we're going to discuss under item 9. And that concludes my chair's report. So any questions or comments or things that we did that I missed? I know we're going to hear on the working groups and all of that sort of stuff. I'll go to this.
It's more of a general remark. When I joined NAPLE, I was a substitute, so I had a week to prepare before my first NAPLE meeting, and I didn't understand what NAPLE was really, what the purpose of it. And after the new statutes and the reboot work, I find NAPLE as the most rewarding international network I'm taking part in. So
that's great.
It's really
down. I fully agree.
Yeah. So it's really a very big restart, reboot, everything in a positive way.
I'm really happy to hear that, because I also feel very much the same way, I think. Yours? Are you going to say it's terrible?
Well, I want to agree with Elizabeth, because I think NAPLE proved its value the last few years. So I want to compliment the board. There was definitely a new wind after 2020. COVID accelerated it, I think. but it's the merits of the people on the board that we are where we are now, and more of the same, please.
Yeah, that's great as well. That's really, really positive. I also feel, just personally, it's been really rewarding. Actually, it's a good. I mean, Barbara, you've been on so many. I don't think you were expecting to be involved. We kind of dragged you into the board, but it's kind of yeah. I think there are other organisations that you can have a deeper governance, and you can get your subcommittees and all that sort of stuff. But there's enough of us to make that sort of communication really easy, if you see what I mean. It's not too many, not too few. You can always rely on the colleagues in the NAPLE network, I think, to help. So yeah, I think it's been a positive 3 years, and we can discuss further what we might do next. Colleagues remotely, is there anything, any questions that you have? No, you all agree it's an amazing organisation. That's great stuff. That's very modest. Yeah, a modest organisation. That's very good. All right, let's move to the working groups discussion, and we just got a text from Mikkel actually, so I don't think he's going to be joining us now. He sent me a email just earlier, and I'm just going to see how easy is it to. Yeah, I think I can read it to you. It's not too long, so he's obviously taken this opportunity to give us a bit of an update. So from Mikkel, this is a short update on the ebook working group. Subsection 1, meetings. During COVID-19, we had several online meetings. Now we're back at the one physical meeting, brackets, when planes do fly. It feels like too little. So going forward, I think we will have 2 annual meetings, a physical one in the spring and an online one in the autumn. So that's interesting. And I think, again, maybe there is that value in the physical. And if you look at that list that Mikkel has on that working group, it's people in our organisations working on ebooks. And I think that's a really good model for NAPLE, because we might not be the right people to really bring the value to that group. And we've adopted the same approach with the Elizabeth's working group. So I think that's a positive thing from Mikkel. Composition. We have always kept the group fluid. Actually, I've not read this email before, so if I'm going to read something that's kind of, you're going to find out as I read it if it says anything rude or something. Composition. We've always kept the group fluid to attract as many interested and interesting people as possible. However, I'm thinking we need a more formal list, not an application procedure, but just a little bit more formality as who's in the group. Okay, well, that shows maturity, doesn't it? That shows that we're going in the right direction. Activities. The group functions as a perennial backing group for questions, ideas, and clarifications. Furthermore, we spent 2021 to 2022 formulating the special view of NAPLE, where copyright, pricing, terms and conditions are certainly important, but also how e-lending impacts libraries and the professions in the library. And I do think this is an important distinction that we do have in NAPLE. Mikkel's always been concerned, in the conversations we've had, is that licensing and pricing thing is frustrating and has to be tackled. But actually, what is the bigger philosophical, existential effect of this change in the service provision? And this group does look at it. Most of our energy has gone into assisting the Oblida Egil with their big report on e-lending in Europe, which was circulated prior to the thing. We've assisted not only with the spreadsheet we made in 2021, but also with the formulation of central challenges and shared findings from our conversations and meetings. Collaboration with the Oblida on this has not been ideal necessarily, but we made the decision early on just to help as much as we could and not getting in as partners, which looked doomed from the outset. And I think that's an interesting observation from Mikkel, in that, and Sandra, you'll know my opinion on this, is that we probably need to have a discussion relatively soon in the ebooks advocacy space. And that's because we have Oblida. NAPLE, I feel, is the level below. We're the information providers. We help the advocacy take place by providing the information. But we also have KR21 that we've also heard from at points. If those two organizations have two different advocacy objectives, then we are in the European Union
particularly space asking for two different things to the same set of officials, which is not a good look and will easily be picked apart by the publisher. So that's something that I think Mikkel is referring to there. And if you look at the Oblida Egel recommendations, which I think are super interesting, you'll note a different approach to the KR21. One is perhaps more, I don't know if you want to call it cooperative, but the Oblida I think is a slightly more recommendations-based approach. And the KR21 is, we've tried that, we're going to try a more combative approach, for want of a better word. So I think that's what Mikkel's referring to there.
Also, can I just add that I think looking at the KR21, this is more geared, just my view, from the domain of academic and scientific publishers. And I think there's somewhere we have to make this distinction, because I think this is the market is totally different for public libraries and trade publishers on the one hand, and the scientific and university publishers, the scientific publishers on the other hand. And also if we don't make that distinction and sort of let it up to the EU to decide, this is going to create the same mess.
I think there's quite a big discussion to be had to tease out the things, because you're right, it's two different sectors, but they both have the problem of the high pricing and the licensing.
Yeah.
So two different sectors, same problem, and then other problems that are specific to each.
Yeah, but in most countries, I think there are two different laws. So if we don't make the distinction, also if you the recommendations in Oblida are more towards cooperation, so maybe legislation is not the way to go. But on the scientific side, they, as you clearly pointed out, done that. Let's move forward.
Yeah, although Barbara, I mean, to an extent in the public library thing, we've also done that, and you know, not really got sort of, and then there's a further complication, which is the English language ebooks market, which is really difficult for us to navigate because of the size of the trade publishers. So I think you know, I'm sure Mikkel will, obviously he's in Luxembourg now, we're going to have the chance to discuss. We've got the session tomorrow in the Oblida conference, so I'm sure. But let's also hold some of our thoughts on this for our open discussion, because it might form some area for us. So then finally, he says, more collaborations. I will most likely present the NAPLE view at the IFLA conference in Rotterdam, and I'm involved in making an IFLA special interest group on e-lending, which should enlarge our pool of partners and give us a more stable influence on IFLA's dealings with e-lending, which I think connects to the KR21 piece. So that's his update. I think the working group has begun sharing presentations, which I think were intended to be shared this morning at the meeting. So we might pull all of them together and share them with all members. From what I could see briefly, they were really interesting. So there's a fair bit of stuff there. This colleagues remotely is probably, we probably had the most concrete output here in terms of our working groups, and it doesn't mean anything against the other sort of working group. It's just that we were able to do that big data collection exercise, which I think, as Mikkel mentioned, really went towards the Oblida report quite considerably, and also has been helping KR21. So there's clearly a lot more life in this issue, and you know, that working group has got a lot more in it. Elizabeth, do you want to talk to us about?
Did you send me the presentation?
I sent it to Stuart.
Yeah, did it get put on the
No, do you have a presentation? Do you have a USB stick?
I can send it to you on the
Or you can send me the moment.
and I can put it on my machine as well.
Okay.
Sandra, I'm going to send it to you so you could also open up yours. Who else has got laptops open? Anna.
Just a moment, so we can share with the colleagues that are virtually present, and maybe
I'm going to actually send it to you.
Of course, you will all see the presentation.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll just send it to everybody that I can see with a laptop, and also to remote colleagues.
Yes, So we had two meetings during 2022, one in May and one in October. And I was looking at the notes. There's a lot of presentations of work in Sweden. And we had some more like discussions, roundtable discussions. And we agreed on the main focus was race awareness. I had hopes that we could share more about leadership and so on, but we're not there yet.
Can you see the presentation? Okay, Diego says.
Yeah. So we actually settled to work on race awareness. It seems like we had to start there. And we move to the next slide. Why do we have this working group? And I think we have to remind ourselves about why we started the group. And the suggestion came from me, from Sweden. And we do have the charter from the Council of Europe. And that's our common framework for all the countries in Europe, since it's from the Council of Europe, not from the European Union. It covers all the European countries. And in the Charter, Article 12, it mentions especially libraries as an important actor in providing all the parts of what the Charter says that the regional or national minorities are entitled to. So it's a clear statement from the Charter that the libraries are important in making all the rest of it come true. Besides that, we have the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, and we have the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and we have Agenda 2030, and we have UNHCR. So we have so many different frameworks, so many different actors or parts saying that this is really an important thing. And looking on a global scale, we lose one language every 2 weeks. So we have a responsibility both for Europe's sake, but also as on a global scale, to really try to get these small languages alive. Using the library as a place both for speaking the language within different program activities and also access literature on that particular language is important in keeping the language alive, and also revitalization of the language to regain a language lost. So that's the background for why we decided to have this working group, because the Charter is connecting all the countries in Europe within the same framework. So we can move to the next slide. So for the next 2 years, I would really like to increase the participation from the NAPLE member countries. We are a really small group on our meetings. Isabella usually takes part. We have managed to have someone from Finland. Estonia usually takes part. Sometimes someone from Norway. but it's really a small group of people, and it's difficult to really get the benefits that I hoped for, exchanging the information and exchanging knowledge about the minority groups and the literature, how to work with this particular user group.
The people who do participate are people in the country that work with collections or work with services, or are they just people interested in the topic?
It differs.
I'm just interested in the topic, and I may add that this is in fact a sensitive topic because we are talking about the minorities group within the nation. And when I discussed with my bosses, well, we should go for it and check whether we have the collections of minor languages and how to increase the awareness. I was said, no, do not steer the disturbances, turbulences, because well, this is the problem from the national level. Of course, we have the chart, we have the international law, but my ads are afraid of stirring up some conflicts, internal conflicts, because minorities, they sometimes claim their independence, they want to disturb from so this is the problem of this group.
Yes, and it's the problem for the whole area. It's the same in IFLA. When I talk about it in IFLA, it's the same thing, that you have the freedom fighters, you have the ones who's fighting for independence within their country, and there is such a political dimension of it. We are fortunate in Sweden, we have a clear legislation in Sweden. I guess you have more or less the same in Norway for those groups that are included as only people and Romani people. But it's not that in other countries. So it is a delicate.
I was just thinking, Ross, did you want to come in? You had your hand up.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask what minorities we are talking about. Sorry,
No, and it took me some time to understand how this charter is organized. It's not like the Declaration of Human Rights or the Children's Rights, because then you have all these articles and either you buy the whole thing and ratify, and then you are obliged to fulfill every of the articles. You take it as a whole package, but the charter is more like pick and choose. So the charter is built of building blocks, you can say, and within each of the blocks you can pick parts of it that you ratify. So it's different from country to country how much of the charter you're using and what kind of rights you actually give the people from the whole package. There is no country that has ratified the whole package. So, for instance, in Sweden, 3 of the minorities have more extended rights because they have a territorial connection. So they have a bit more extended rights, and the other 2 without the territorial connection, they are a slight difference, but not on the same level of rights. For instance, if you are a Sami-speaking person, you have the right to go to court and use your Sami language. But if you are a Roma people that has no territorial connection, you can't use your language in court. So there are differences, and there are big differences between the countries. How many languages you're ratified for, and what privilege or what rights you give them. And for instance, Flemish is only in the territory, but not in the whole country. So it's like a
pick and choose charter. So you have to go into this table and have a look what have this country chosen, what paragraphs have they chosen, and what kind of rights is connected to it.
Because I was wondering if you know, the increasing participation within our group. I think we did this at the beginning, but I think maybe if we recirculated kind of a person profile against that sort of thing,
but
we might be able to.
I can go to the next slide because I think a little bit of the key to get this going in a way and to extend it.
A rebrand.
Is the rebrand.
Right, okay.
To change the name, because when it's national minorities and regional languages, it's connected to the charter. And that excludes, for instance, Estonian. Estonian is a small language with dialects, and some of the dialects is dying now. They have to really work hard to keep the dialects going. But Estonian is the national language in Estonia. So it's not a minority language or a regional language, but they're facing the same problems with meeting the users for some of the dialects. If we go to Denmark, Greenlandic is also a national language, but a weak language that really needs support. Scottish Gaelic is not included in the charter, but it needs support. So I think we should, my suggestion is that we find another name that is more directed to small languages that need support rather than connected to the charter. Because then we can include languages that is excluded by the name now.
Preserving the historical heritage is less sensitive than supporting the active minority.
So that's also my knowledge has increased during the years, and my understanding of the charter and understanding of the politics in different countries have increased during this year. And what has been done in the Nordic countries, because we have a Nordic cooperation there, that they made a 3-year project, and they call it Small Languages. And they don't make any difference. And then they could include Greenlandic, for instance, because it's a small language, but it's not a minority language.
Is there a definition of small language?
I can check in the report if they could give a kind of
the dialects. The dialects, not a small language, but dialect. And I really, as that inspired me, so I done my research on Polish legislation on this chart and these minorities, and I discovered that in fact this chart is for historical minorities, and we have more than 10 or about 11 historical minorities, because Poland used to be a big multicultural country, and after the Second World War it was downsized to this homogeneous model, and but this does not fit with the new immigrants. This is another layer, because we have these minorities supported by this European legislation, but in our countries we have other migrant groups, people speaking with other languages who also should use libraries and be incorporated. And we have this experience of Ukrainians, because we were the neighboring country taking the huge inflow of Ukrainian refugees last year, and of course they came to the libraries to support, to rest, to be guided with the documents and all these accommodation stuff, like to find out themselves in a new country. And libraries reacted like librarians do. They said, we have librarian
customers, like our Ukrainian users, we need to buy them a book in Ukrainian. And the conclusion is they came, they use the libraries, they use for language courses just to fill out the documents, to use the computer, but only tiny share of them remain as readers and borrowers and book borrowers. So this is kind of lessons learned that libraries are important institution just to absorb and provide some guidance, but not the books themselves. Books are not the main issue, and not the main service for in this kind of humanitarian crisis. And now we have libraries who invest their resources into Ukrainian books. The refugees are moved to other countries, to Western countries, and well, we have now the nice collection of Ukrainian books in our libraries. It's interesting that also the Ukrainian people, Ukrainian citizens who are in Poland, they borrow Polish books because they wanted to learn Ukraine, not the Ukrainian. And I think it's like provide the guidance. Support, integrate, give them space, give them language courses, language cafe, but not buy a book necessarily.
That's just material, yeah.
That's exactly what happened in Sweden 2015 when we had all these asylum seekers. They came to the libraries, but they weren't there to read in Arabic or
Dari or whatever language. They were there to use the Swedish materials. But when it comes to, if I call it the small languages now, just to make it easy, they have to reconnect to a language that is almost lost.
Yeah.
They have a particular interest of finding books in their language or their dialect to keep the language going and to make this generation passage. Because in Sweden and since we have focused very much in Sweden on this particular thing, we have also learned a lot now. And for several of the minority language, grandma and grandpa speak it fluently. Their children lost it because then it was more important to learn Swedish. And the grandchildren wants to regain the language. And that's a hard situation. And when the libraries actually support their aim to reconnect to the culture and to their language, it gives a very big payoff. It's important. It's incredibly important for Sami people to come into the public library and find books in their language. And unless we do proactive things, we're going to lose those languages because there are no other part in society that could do the same thing as libraries does. In school, they have maybe 45 minutes each week lesson in their minority language. They're not going to learn a language with 45 minutes each week education. They need the libraries, they need the books, they need the activities.
So if you did, I'm just saying, so some of you will know we've got a new national public library strategy, which is literally ready to be launched right now in Ireland. And there are two particular targets in it relating to Irish language. One is provision of Irish language reading materials, and the other is services in Irish language. If you kind of branded, or whatever you want to call it, if you sort of were able to incorporate the Greenlandic, the Gaelics into this working group, then I could see real potential in Ireland for sort of learning and getting involved in that. And I would say that would be the case
in other countries, because then you can avoid this tension that you have in different countries due to a political situation, and you have like fractions that seeks the independence. If you only focus on the strength of the language, this is a weak language with little resources. It's very little written in the language. The few books that are published, we need to try to get it to the users.
If we could, so I'm always thinking about how this would work with the Irish Library sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, you could some sort of, I think awareness raising should remain the primary thing, but you could imagine if we were able to get a few more people involved, there could be work on guidelines or best practice.
Yes, and that was on my first list of things that I hope for. You can change the slide to the last one, because then we are at the discussion part of it. And my suggestion is that we rethink the name of the groups. So we don't exclude languages that we could include, or dialects that needs the support from the libraries. And also we have to increase the participation, but so otherwise this working group is going to.
So would we, in terms of a way forward then, would one approach be to ask the working group as it presently is constituted to put forward a proposal for a name change?
Yeah.
Bring it to everyone, and we can provide feedback and then approve, and then off the back of that go back out to the network to ask for people to be involved in the next iteration of the working group, I think.
Yeah, and in that sense, I have looked at Mika's work with the ebook group. It's not the same people sitting in the NAPLE forum. So I like to get to the next circle and get people that are involved or particularly interested or have connections.
Yeah, I certainly would be able to find somebody in Ireland to be involved in this, whereas previously it might have been more difficult because Gaelic I can now see would be in the mix.
In the mix, yeah.
Alice, you want to?
Well, you made a country profiling when you started with this work group. Maybe it's time to study it again and ask for all countries in which languages in which people do they serve. For if they're minority, if they're legally confirmed, or if they're just dialect or just part of historic some kind of just to see how many languages are there in certain country that are officially recognized, and how many dialects or minority languages or small languages are there that are not yet discussed.
And also make us a clear divide between immigrant languages coming in on say the last 70 years or so. So it's in Sweden, it's languages before the 1900s that have been legally fixated. So they have a longer history in Sweden. So for instance, Greek or Arabic it will take a lot of time unless until they have been present enough time. So and that's the challenge, and that has been a really tough thing to communicate in Sweden as well, because in Sweden we have this one language norm, and that's due to political reasons in after Sweden and Finland was separated from each other, and it says one country, one language. Everyone should speak Swedish, and that was up to the 60s, 70s, the only way to see it. And therefore, in many public libraries, all other languages except Swedish is foreign languages. But now we're talking about people who have been present in Sweden for 500-600 years. They are not any foreigners. It's not a foreign language. So there is you have to steer how you talk about it, so you understand that this is languages that has a long history and a long presence in this area, whether they are recognized or not within the charter.
This could be a theme for profiling.
So what I think we should do, just looking at the agenda, we'll leave this here and ask maybe Elizabeth and the group to come back to us. We've got, I mean, that's a good exercise as well, the one that Alice has mentioned there. And maybe we could we'll have it on the agenda at the next members meeting. To see, I mean, I'm looking at what it says, a NAPLE statement is the piece that we haven't discussed on there. We haven't issued too many NAPLE statements, really.
Just one or two.
What have we done? We've done some joint stuff with PR 2030
and the Ukrainians,
I think
Ukraine and the corporation. I think
it's
only two.
I mean, I don't see any other organizations particularly working in this space, which would mean that, because my initial feeling is that NAPLE shouldn't, we don't, thinking about bandwidth, resources and positioning, maybe fewer statements is better than more statements, if you see what I mean. However, if there's something that others aren't doing, and it's important to us, and clearly it is important to us because we have it as a working group, and that could be something for us to consider. But maybe the first steps would be to look at the renaming, gauge the interest, try to get a broader number of people involved in it, ask that group to come back to us for a work plan, and if the statement is included in the work plan, then we proceed from there. So, does that sound good? All right, good. In that case, I think, thank you, Elizabeth. We'll go on with the agenda. I think Spanish colleagues are waiting. I think next, what's next? Is it Diego? Or is it
some other slide?
Those were just extras for depending on how the discussion.
Okay. So it's read more. Slides.
Okay. Sorry, no, I switched to my agenda. So Diego, can you hear us?
Yes.
This is your time to shine. And hello to Ulla. Nice to see you there.
Okay.
That was frozen, or she's still.
Okay. I'm gonna share the presentation. It's a very short presentation. We'll be arriving tonight at Luxembourg, so tomorrow we'll meet you all in person.
Great. We will look forward.
Okay. So I don't know. Okay. Yes, here. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. So presentation. Yes. Okay.
So you don't see the full view. You just see the print in the PowerPoint. So you have to start the presentation and then share the full view.
Okay. But okay. Start the presentation and then share.
Slideshow view.
Yeah, slideshow.
Start the presentation. But I cannot. Okay. I'm gonna try another thing, which is
use Alt-Tab to
share all. Oh, I can do this. Okay. Anyway, I think I can make it small. Maybe.
Yeah, you can do it in a PowerPoint. So it's necessary to do the slideshow view.
I don't know how to do it now.
Do it like you just did, then it's fine. As long as
yeah, but Okay, I don't know
We're on top of
why.
each other here, we're all crammed in. So.
Okay, let me see. Yes, yes. Here.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
it's okay. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so this is very briefly the statistics of the blog for the last year. Well, it's more or less the same every year. It's you can see there's a few months that are not so busy, but it's normal because it's, I think it's July and December with all the holidays and all. The average of pages seen is 1.8, which they say that it's a good average. So it means that people stays there and see a few more pages than the one that brought them there. This is the per year period, the last few years. You can see that's a slight decrease on the traffic, but well, I think it stays more or less in the same levels as other years. So an update on the numbers. This 137 libraries with 2 new incorporations this last year. This is roughly the same every year. It's not that many libraries incorporating anymore. And also not that many new sisterships. So still 17 countries involved and 57 sisterships. For the last year we've had we've hired a company that was in charge of the strategy, the social media strategy. We are happy with them, and they did 3 promotion campaigns in Facebook. They explained that Facebook now has changed its ways, let's say, and for now to make an impact, you have to make a campaign, apparently. So we've done 3 campaigns, monthly campaigns. In February was the first. The target was to reach potential libraries that wanted to join. The second one was in March, also sharing the best practice that we share in the blog. And the third was in April. We tried this time to target libraries in 2 countries that they are it's France and Germany. France, there's only 1 library involved, and Germany is still no libraries in the program. So we thought we could maybe target them specifically. And the results, we are told they are good because we got like over 80,000 impressions. I think it's, well, I think they say it's fine. So, and well, they designed also new materials, static and dynamic, that were very helpful for the Twitter and Facebook accounts. So we're happy on that. Other actions to promote the program. Well, this year the largest university in Spain, which is Complutense from Madrid, they asked us to give session about the program in this master, the library and agent of social educational transformation, and it went pretty good actually. And we designed it so they could have not only the vision of the coordinators of a program, but also from a library that is very active in the NAPLE sister libraries. So I gave them an overview of the program, and this librarian gave a little presentation on how was her experience as a librarian in the program, which I think it went pretty well. They were very enthusiastic about this, and this year in October we'll have this National Congress on Public Libraries. We organize every 2 years, and we are planning to do something with the sister libraries within the Congress. We don't know what exactly yet, but we might ask you for advice or ideas or something that if you want to tell us will be very useful. The Congress is we want to focus a little bit also in Europe, not only in the National Public Libraries. So we thought it was a good opportunity for promoting this program. What else? Okay, what's next? And that's the last slide. We'd like to update the list of country representatives. We realized we noticed there's a few countries that don't have a national representative. So, well, talk to you, or maybe you can look for the list on the blog and check if your country is represented, or if the person who's there is not is not there anymore, or whatever. I'd like to follow up on the sisterships, because okay, there's 57 sisterships, but we don't know actually which ones are active or not. So I think this could be a good thing to write them and ask them if they are still active or not, or and then so we can have this a more accurate vision of the program, of the impact of the program. And we were thinking about redesigning the blog, update some contents, and put the list of representatives in a place which is more visible, because now it's a little bit hidden. So that's it. I didn't want to make it thanks. I didn't want to make it very long, because as I said before, I would like to well, if you want to talk about the program, or give some ideas, or whatever, I'll be around in the next few days.
Yeah,
in Luxembourg.
we'll see you tomorrow, Diego. Thanks for that. Any questions for Diego?
I wonder if other strategy could be to try to have other sister libraries through the system of sister cities.
Yeah, that's actually a very good idea. At some point we thought about it, but it's and I don't know if we did it. We never explored it actually, but I'm gonna write it down and definitely follow up on this.
Because on Wikipedia you find a lot of lists of sister cities, and maybe that's another route towards to expand.
And it's much easier to start with the sisterhood.
Yeah. I mean, my So my observation there, Diego, was just if I understood the presentation correctly, in the last year, that the number of sisterships, did it either increase by one or did it stay the same?
Yeah, the sisterships has increased in two.
Two, because then
one. Yeah,
Right.
and two new libraries and one
because, you know,
sister.
I like seeing the social media. It gives it good visibility, but I would say the metric of success there is less the page impressions and more the number of new sisterships, if you see what I mean. So it would seem that whilst I like seeing the profile, it hasn't resulted in the actual increase. So maybe that sister cities thing offers an alternative roadmap, and then we should probably, when you're here tomorrow, see if we can talk to Ilona from PL 2030, because I talked to her and I think she mentioned that there could even be some tangential piece on this from the work plan for culture. So that really would be, we've already got the initiative, it's fully formed, it can be brought into the mix and possibly then expanded with an additional bit of momentum from that high level piece. So I guess we'll be grabbing you tomorrow, see if we can find Ilona and talking about that. Any
another question, Diego?
Yeah.
You had a couple of ideas a year or two ago, I think, which we didn't really follow up on, concerning the libraries program and Erasmus. Do you remember?
The what? Excuse me?
The Sister Libraries program and the Erasmus Plus program.
Erasmus Plus. Yeah.
A couple of ideas. I think one of the ideas was that to discuss with the national Erasmus offices if they could work something out in cooperation with you or with us on how libraries could become involved in the Erasmus program. I think that's an idea that's now actually been taken up by PL 2030 with the project on EU funding. So that's quite interesting. And I think you had another idea concerning the sister libraries themselves being involved in an Erasmus project. Have you thought more about it, or maybe we can talk about it tomorrow?
Yeah, that's two things that I've wanted to do for a while now. Now that my boss isn't here, I'm going to say that her predecessor wasn't very interested on that. So and I think Laura would like the idea, and we probably can stop bringing this up. The one thing was somehow from NAPLE, if we could ask for an Erasmus Plus grant to for the KI 104, I think it is. It's a very small budget for the Erasmus Plus. I think it's 8,000 euros per project, so it's easy to get these. So one idea was to ask maybe for a grant from NAPLE, and every year maybe give 3 sisters the opportunity of do a shadow how you say it, shadow working or shadow job.
Yeah, some sort of I know what you're saying. The difficulty there is that we're not a legal entity, so we can't get funding. Barbara, your hands up.
Maybe on this, we had recently a meeting with a person in Germany who is dealing in the Erasmus Plus office with all kinds of these exchanges, and she approached us because she said she had
lots of money left there because nobody did any traveling in the last 3 years, and she would like to get a lot of involvement from libraries in that. And I think think the national offices of Erasmus actually give a lot of advice. We do not need to have
we
the
found the
NAPLE.
same. They're really
What we need is to spread the information maybe via Naples that this is possible now, and there is really a lot of money.
Yeah, and I will say, Stuart, that yeah, we don't have this legal entity, but now that we are with PL 2030, and I believe that this could be also grounds for cooperation.
Yeah, that's maybe why we should talk to Ilona, because I think certainly her interest was piqued by the sistership program recently when I talked to her, and I'd agree with Barbara. We've also had contact with our Erasmus people, and they're really keen. Okay, Diego, let's pick up this conversation when you're with us tomorrow, and we'll all jump in. That'll be great. Unless there's any other questions for Diego now. No, okay. Then in that case, it's 4 o'clock. So Alish, maybe we'll do communications, and then maybe we'll take the next stretch or something.
Sure. As Stuart already mentioned, in the last 3 years, the main shift was in communication, was setting up a new web page and getting us a special domain. So we are found on the internet, because the last one was slightly too long to find out. So we put up every piece of information that we find informational that will do great help to get a comparison between different countries in the sense of legislation, in the sense of which kind of national strategic plans were put up, and also maybe the most important is contact information for all the people who are representing the country in the NAPLE forum. Then the next one, we try to put up some more materials on social media, but we were not so very good at it.
Because it requires resources.
But you need the materials, you need people, and you need something special that is not part of your job. So if I put something that is interesting for my country, for this certain organization that I work, it's hard to put, then put it also on a NAPLE, Facebook or Twitter. So Facebook and Twitter were not very useful for us. So we tried to gain more attention on a LinkedIn profile. So I don't know if there is a bigger shift in our, if we are more visible to professional world, but I don't know, we're trying to do something here, and mostly we put up notice on the second very important thing that we do on our webpage. This is blog posts. We started this 1 year ago, something like that. Some posts are already missing, and we are trying to we're trying to.
I haven't launched my strategy yet.
No. But that here comes the spring, and I believe that there will be more time for making no new posts.
But one of the things that worked really well, I thought, was that you had the calendar.
So, and there are also some themes that could be discussed, the themes that we found on the NAPLE forum level, it would be interested for us. And some were already covered through the work of work group or to already published blog posts, but there are some other themes that could be discussed for all those who are keen to make.
I would say that we shouldn't leave here without planning the next 12 months. We're here, all of us have a responsibility basically to do one piece. I'm certainly going to do my strategy piece once, probably that would be May or June.
Yeah, okay.
But let's try and help you out by getting names in.
Okay.
Because we're all here physically, so.
Yeah, I'll circulate again
the conference in August, because that will just involve using other content that's already.
Yeah, because I was just thinking about things that I sort of use for this blog, but also use for the public library section blog from IFLA.
Mhm.
So things that come to mind would be that we're gearing up for an evaluation of the library law. And there we have the ministry is very keen of getting an obligation in the new law towards municipalities that they need to have a public library in at least one in their municipality. So that is something that I was thinking about, and other stuff probably. So yeah, I think
and it's got to be the same for our other countries.
Yeah,
it's got to be.
Like we'll be discussing after the break, probably libraries and democracy is something that could work both ways. And there are all sorts of topics that could be interesting for blogs and other stuff. So yeah.
So you need to go around with a list and place us wrapped.
Yeah.
So what are you going to write about?
Yeah.
What are you gonna
Okay.
Yeah.
That'll be 2 days for it.
Yeah.
And I also circulate the web page that we collect all the volunteers.
Yeah.
Who like to write for our blog. And there's also at the start of Ukraine war, we put up a special web page in cooperation with the Blida in Public Library 2030 for refugees, for libraries for refugees, and it worked for 3-4 months. It was the point where the libraries could get new information how to help Ukrainian refugees. And it's the main idea is that in the foreseeable future we'll get a special web page for how to help all the refugees in European libraries. But we are not there yet.
No, we may hear more about that in the Reader conference. Full stop, I would imagine. You said are we more visible? I would say certainly people have been coming to me more about NAPLE over the last 2 or 3 years. So I think we have been made more visible by the website, and being able to refer people just to naple.eu and
that's all information
really simple. So I would certainly congratulate you on the work that you've done. I just think it's great, and it was so quick to turn that around. And the blog model is something which is reusable. I pitched it to IFLA as well, the way that we do it. And I think it's all of us have a knowledge and expertise about something in our country which crosses over. I agree with you on the social media. For the resources that we have, it's just a step too far, really. LinkedIn is just fine.
LinkedIn really does make a difference. I realized that because people kind of approached me after they saw.
Oh, really?
LinkedIn.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's the you identified it. It's the professional. It's the right.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah, definitely. Questions for Arash? Comments?
Just thinking about the blog. If we could, an idea could be to make some kind of connection between the members meeting and the blog contents, so that we open for a discussion or something, or questions or something like that for writers for blog posts.
Yes. Yeah. So we're having a members meeting on topic X, and a blog post is released before the meeting or after the meeting in the same topic?
Before the meeting.
Yeah.
And then we could open for questions or discussions around the blog post.
Yeah.
On the following
as an agenda item.
Yeah. Just to make something more of the blog contents.
Yeah. I like that.
Would be something to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's okay. Well, thank you, Alice. Is there any questions from our remote participants? All okay. Okay, very good. Then why don't we take 5?
Okay.
Walk around, see if there's coffee anywhere or whatever. Let's see. So, maybe let's hope so. So we'll come back here just let's say 25 past, and we'll go for another hour. We'll do the quick elections piece, and then we'll see
Okay.
what we've got.
So I'll post this.
Yeah, in our scheduled time. So yes, you want
Start to when people are coming back.
colleagues, welcome back. Okay, Laura. Oh, you've changed location, Laura, I think. Yeah, very good. All right, so we've got one kind of order of business before, well, because what I propose is that with the EU work plan and the PL 2030 cooperation, we roll it into a general discussion about sort of future activities. But before we do that, we do have the issue around the constitution of the next. So as per the statutes, at least a month before the meeting, I went out to the members to gather expressions of interest for the board for the period 2023 to 2026. And in an email to you, I think I sent on Friday, I shared with you the outcome of that process. The outcome is that we have 7 nominations for the board, and the statutes allow for at least 5, but no more than 7 members. So actually, we've had a pretty good outcome to the process. I suppose you could say we've actually had a very positive outcome, because we would be increasing the size of the board to 7, which means that people actually want to be involved. So I'm seeing that as a positive. Before we sort of go through that, I do want to pay big thanks to Barbara, who is stepping back from the board after serving with us for 3 years. Because Barbara gets to retire, which I'm very jealous of. I'm ready.
No, there's still a lot ahead of you.
Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah, that's great. That's great. People maybe you can't see, but Barbara's really grinning. But I do want to thank you. I mean, you and I have worked together for a very long time. Really,
Actually, yes.
When you think
I thought about it this
Yeah.
morning, actually. We started in faith
Yeah,
together.
20 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
And I was really super happy to poach you for this board. So thank you for everything that you've done. It's been really great. It's been great working, I think.
It was really great working with all of you. I mean, this was really a great board, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was a really good board. In fact, it's so good that Anna, Alice, Isabella, Bruno, and myself have put ourselves up for the board for the next 3 years. Under the statutes, you can be elected once. And we have been joined on the list by Isabel, who is unable to be with us today, but with Laura, who will be joining us tomorrow here with Diego. I think, Laura, that's right, isn't it? Yep. So what we need to do, as per the NAPLE statutes, is basically agree to constitute the next board from the nominated candidates. In the statutes, there isn't such a thing as a quorum. It's basically a majority vote for this. So I think unless, and we're doing this a little bit sort of not necessarily on the fly, but it's kind of, because there's no quorum, it's down to us and to anything I received via email to make the decision. We don't need a 2/3 majority, because we're not trying to change the statutes or the foundational status of the organisation. So therefore, that means a simple majority is needed, and I think I would move the motion that the candidates, as outlined in my email of Friday, be accepted as the new board for NAPLE for the period 2023 to 2026. Would somebody second the motion?
I will. Yeah.
Barbara will second the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Very good. Hands. Yeah, very good. Laura, vote for yourself, quick. Very good. In that case, let the record show that the new board is constituted, and what I propose is that at some point during the meeting here, in Luxembourg, we take a quick coffee because we need to just, the board agrees a new president or the next president. So that's great. Okay, congratulations, everybody. Well done. Welcome, Laura. Very good. In that case, I think what we'll do is we'll throw, well, basically, as I mentioned before, we did a survey in 2021 about priorities for NAPLE for the period of the board. That was turned into a work plan. I think that was a really good process. But we have a chance here maybe to have a discussion rather than a survey, at least to get the ball rolling on the strategy or the areas that we want to work in for the following 3 years. So really what I suggested was that we have an open discussion and see what issues are sort of out there that we need to consider. I think we should put everything on the table. And then, you know, don't hold back anything because we might not have the resources, because we can always decide what we want to do based on our resources. So what I might do is ask our colleagues remotely first, actually, if they have sort of thoughts about what topics you want to see NAPLE engage with over the next 3 years. It could be as simple as saying, I want us to continue doing this rather than something new. But I think it would be great to hear from you remotely, an opportunity to sort of say what you think's worked well, what's not, and what you think we should be looking at. And as I say, everything on the table, and we'll work backwards to try to narrow it down to things that we can actually work on. So, Arne,
are you skipping the 2 points about cooperation?
I said that I would roll. Okay. I think they should be rolled into the discussion. Yeah, and if nobody else mentions them, and then I'll throw them in for sure. But I think it would be good if we went remote first. And yeah. So, Laura, welcome to the board.
Thank you so much.
What do you be looking at?
I haven't been in the organization here, never. This is my first time, so I don't really have an opinion of what you've been doing this long. So I don't know if I want to continue in this path or just give some new ideas. I hope I learn quickly so I can give more ideas. But one of the things I want to focus on is the advocacy program.
Okay.
I think with this association with Evelida and Public Libraries 2030, I think it's a good opportunity to focus on that and maybe get to the citizens and to the politicians to get more importance to the role we have in public libraries and get them to know what kind of activities we do there.
Okay, no, I think that's good. And I think that's definitely a topic for us to discuss now, NAPLE's advocacy role. And I think that does cross over to the work plan for culture piece and the cooperation piece. So we'll note that down. Mirko, I know you're in for 6 months, but that means you've got a chance to shape us.
Yes. I think this sounds like I mean, as you know, I don't know the background of this association, but I mean, it sounds very interesting, everything I've heard, and actually I think I've missed if you've sent me, but I mean, if you have these regular meetings online for non-board members, so I think that's like very. Do you know, was Lena very active in this association or this in NAPLE?
Lena wasn't one of the most active. No, just to be frank.
I didn't receive a note about NAPLE, but if I'd be working here, I'd love to be active in this work. And actually, as you were talking, and what Laura just pointed out, I don't know quite the background, but this advocacy role, that would be something that I would also investigate if possible within NAPLE.
Okay, that's good.
I mean, there's always room for influencing how things are done, but information is also, of course, a way of influencing, that putting out information. Thank you.
Thanks. No, that's good. That's good. So another one for us to, I think we need to tease out what our role is. I'm sure that's going to come through. Ulla, what do you think?
I think we can continue with the same priorities. and continually share with best practices and also the advocacy.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we're now going to have a discussion about advocacy. I think this is definitely coming through. And Diego?
I think what you said was fine. I think it's a good thing. I would like to point out we in Spain, we are working a lot for a few years, last few years in citizen participation in libraries. I think this is aligned with the plan on public libraries of the plan for culture. And I would like to see these maybe developing in Europe also.
Yeah, yes, the citizen participation. And Diego, in Spain, you and I had a conversation about this some months ago, and if I understand it, is it sort of libraries helping people to understand how they can participate more in the democratic process, or is it another angle?
Yeah, it's another angle. It's we have this methodology that allows to build a library as a citizen library, laboratory. I'm sorry. It's well, it's it allows for the library to develop projects that are proposed by the citizens, and developed in collaboration with other citizens. So it allows the library for being a space where collaborative work is done between the citizens, and we have a whole program on that, involving a course and some different actions to promote this in libraries, which is very successful. And well, the results are very promising, and I think it can work very well in other countries.
I was just getting up the I guess you guys may have looked at the work plan for culture wording on the library's target, but in case you haven't, the kind of the high level objective in the EU work plan for culture is called Building Bridges, and it says strengthen the multiple roles of libraries as gateways to and transmitters of cultural works, skills, and European values. And then Diego's right that certainly some of what he just said there would fall into the section underneath that called the rationale, which says libraries play a key role in Europe's democratic, social, cultural, and educational landscape at all levels. They make a significant contribution to building democracy, citizen engagement, and public participation activities across the EU, including in rural and remote areas, including the outermost regions. They welcome diverse groups, develop programs and activities reflecting current societal challenges, which might be something which we can tackle in just a second, and provide access to pluralist and reliable information and diverse cultural content in safe and accessible environments. They are essential gateways to local indigenous data, knowledge, research, and culture. And this has a target output of starting a comprehensive debate and explore fields for promoting and strengthening libraries, identifying different dimensions and areas with potential, and exploring funding lines under EU programs, bringing together policymakers and library professionals, and exploring possibilities for training and further activities for professionals. And I'm putting that there now at this point in the discussion, because my initial observation on that, which I found really interesting, and not necessarily negative, but interesting, is that it's really focusing on the library as the community institution rather than reading books, all of that sort of thing. It's that's not in the mix. It's about our sort of societal role. And I think the citizen participation thing that Diego's mentioned, and I'll put it on the table here. Elizabeth, myself, and Sandra were talking prior to the meeting about in Ireland right now, we're having a big problem with a coordinated campaign to remove LGBT plus materials for teenagers and young adults from our libraries. And it's being coordinated by a number of groups who aren't really real. They're what we call AstroTurf NGOs. They could be one person who's declared themselves to be a group. They have a big crossover with anti-vax, anti-immigrant, right-wing groups, and they're clearly following the American model of targeting libraries' collections in the US. And that's happening right now in Europe. So I think, you know, some of the things that we just mentioned here is kind of interesting as potential areas for engagement. But colleagues who are attending remotely there have mentioned advocacy a number of times. And I'd be really interested to hear kind of, now that we've been going in NAPLE for 3 years, Laura, you wouldn't have been in these discussions, but you know, we previously looked at our advocacy role, and we looked at what might be appropriate for us when we have IBLIDA, when we have IFLA, when we have PL 2030. And we previously discussed that our advocacy role was suited very much to providing information for the other organizations to pick up and sort of run with. So the question I would have for our group is do we see that as being enough for this next phase of the European work plan, or should we slightly adjust and think more? Because some of us are governments, remember, so we need to think about who we are. Joris, you were first, and then Elizabeth.
Well, I see our advocacy, the function of the governments we represent. We are civil servants. Our role is to make policy, or to help make policies about public libraries. So promote the importance of libraries, yes, but my dream is to help make library legislation in Flanders, and that is not the case now. So if NAPLE can help me there, it would be great. I'm not sure if we should campaign for the importance of libraries to the general public. I don't think so. I think that's the role of IBLIDA over there. I see the role of NAPLE, especially towards the governments we represent and we work for. But our loyalty is, of course, for the governments and the policymakers who are elected. So it's a bit a double role, but nevertheless, there is space enough, I think.
Okay. So that's opening other space. Elizabeth, and then on.
It's also depending on what way the IFLA European section is going, because I
imagine that IFLA is more the kind of organization that gives advocacy. I mean, that's the most frequent word they use in IFLA context is advocacy. Like you described, we are providers of data in a sense that we collect in our countries, and also we make these overviews.
I think with IFLA, the advocacy that IFLA's main priority areas are focusing on would be the SDGs, development focus, and to a greater or lesser extent, the kind of public access to the internet piece, both of which are hugely important, and we don't really tackle either of them in NAPLE, and that's fine because others are doing that. When it comes to the work plan for culture, IFLA hasn't really got its eye on that, and I think that's probably a good thing because it might be overstepping into where IBLIDA and PL 2030 are, and muddying the waters a little bit. So I'd say that we wouldn't be stepping on any IFLA toes there. But I think what's interesting is when we looked at our advocacy role before as the providers of information for, like, we all agreed that we didn't want to do ebook advocacy, right? We weren't going to go into the policymakers and ask for X, Y, and Z, but we'd provide a bleeder or others with that. When we decided that, which I still think is a very solid position, by the way, we didn't have this EU work plan for culture, so that wasn't even on the table. So if we can find a way to maybe do work that helps Joris, for example, and me and all of us in that context, then that might be the way that we could go. Arne, what do you think?
I'd just like to say that we with Joris and Elizabeth in that position, that I think NAPLE is not an advocacy network or an advocacy organization. Many of us are civil servants, and we should, act like civil servants and not like, other organizations can take care of the advocacy for libraries. That's my position. But we should definitely discuss how we can work together with the other organizations, for instance, in connection with cultural art. That's for sure.
So it's almost like trying to find what we would bring to the overall advocacy work of the sector, rather than NAPLE is the advocacy organization. So it's still driving on the same road towards the same destination, but what do we bring to the mix? And
I think also, how can we strengthen the library by combining and exploiting the expertise of the network? That's for me the main the main value of NAPLE. Because together we are much more than me, just me or just my department.
Yeah, I certainly do. That for me is also how I try to use NAPLE in Ireland. Is, the capital programs piece that I put out recently, I use all that information to try to get policy changed in my own country. So I do go and do my advocacy in Ireland, but I'm using that. But what I feel, it'll be interesting to hear then from PO 2030 and from the leader over the next couple of days about what they're going to be wanting to see happen in relation to this work plan piece. Yeah, what are they looking for? Because that will probably help us answer this question a bit more easily. Sandra, what do you think as well after we had that conversation? What do you?
Well, there are two things that come to mind with regards to yours and also others. I think what helped us in the Netherlands is highlighting the changed role of public libraries and their support to communities. And slowly it sort of, you see that policymakers understand, well, at least in the Netherlands, because I think it's there's a very specific situation, but it helped them to understand the essential part of public libraries in every community, in big cities and in low, rural, small communities. And that helped us to sort of be basically two things: to act as a national network towards ministries, not only Ministry of Culture, but also others, but at the same time sort of act as a network towards local communities. And that is really powerful. And sort of we see that then everybody understands the essential part that public libraries play in that. And that sort of, in the end, it comes down to money. Sort of budget cuts to public libraries would increase all sorts of community problems further down the line. So now that sort of realization helped us to understand policymakers that in the other way around, investing in public libraries would hopefully then
diminish all these issues down the line. So I think that is one thing, and the other thing, picking up from the conversation we had, and also looking at the EU work plan, is that we see that public libraries, not only on the materials but also on the programming side that they provide, I think all our democracies, you see that there's a sort of a hang to the right wings. And that means that public libraries, if we want to stay neutral and work for an inclusive society, are coming under attack with right-wing groups or demonstrators clearly sort of saying that that we need to adapt or programs, or we need to adapt our collection. And these can be small incidents, but I think this is something that really stands where a public library is crucial, also in the sense that I explained in the other part. So I think if this is not something that PL 2030 or IBLIDA would like to embrace, this is something that we could, I think, really look at. How can we support public libraries in every country to be this voice of democracy and be this voice for an inclusive society?
And before coming to Elizabeth, that would work, I think, because the work we do in that area would enable us to do better in our own country.
Yeah.
That's the piece, isn't it? We're not saying Naples then going to the EU and asking to do something. It's like we're surfacing the issue, exploring it, finding out how we will deal with it, potentially either just understanding from our own perspective how that can make our work better, or putting it into some guidelines, or at least a report to say best practice. Yeah. Elizabeth.
Yeah, we have in the program the role of culture and cultural professionals in promotion and defense of democracy and human rights in a fragile context. So that's what we're talking about.
That is, yeah.
So it's just adding libraries. Now it says the role of culture, but we always feel that we are included in that description. Libraries is one way to promote culture and transmit culture, and cultural professionals. Yes, in a sense, we are.
Yeah.
So I mean, if we're going to try to, which I think is a good idea, to connect to this strategy, we already have a description of it. Yeah. We just have to pick it down to
the library level.
Yeah, I think we should make it more concrete in the sense that there is enough in this strategic work plan for all of us to basically say this is something that on the EU level we could take and see on a national level, and then on a local level, what does this mean?
And it's also interesting that they write it in a fragile context. So this is kind of awareness of what we are discussing now. You can't take democracy and the human rights as granted anymore. We have to defend it.
Yeah. I like that. I was just getting up page 31 there. Yeah. So there's definitely a piece there. Yeah. So this to me could be, from the way that we've been normally working within NAPLE, this to me does lend itself to possibly a number of members, meetings, subjects, blog posts, and work throughout the next sort of 12 months.
Maybe a new webinar with interesting speakers for a broader audience, not just us.
Beyond the members. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, maybe even with so I think we need to hear from PL 2030 and from from Iblida about what they want to do with the work plan, but this issue particularly goes beyond just the EU 2027. You know, it's UK colleagues, it's you know, Anna, and obviously we've got a lot of members from outside of the EU.
Just a question concerning the work plan. Who decides how to proceed on these issues?
Yeah,
isn't that the commission? It's not really PO 2030 and the leader.
It's actually a group which is composed of national experts.
Yes.
And those are the people we in Germany have started to talk to, because they meet now regularly and they will set up, you know, agenda and focus and so on.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
yes.
who's in charge of the group? Who's appointed the group?
So the group is not yet appointed, no, but they're looking for people.
So the commission will be basically, so there's this kind of going on at the moment, I think, to basically constitute. It's called an OMC, like something like an overall monitoring board. I've
forgotten what it stands for. It's a kind of a group which meets regularly. This is kind of a procedure which they normally use, because here we talk about the EU ministry, so we talk about something and no longer about commission.
So we talk about the national countries getting together.
Open method of coordination.
Open method of coordination.
And generally, from what I understand, and we're going to hear more about this, I'm positive from Ilona in particular. From what I understand, it would be government representatives.
Yes.
I also understand the publishers have already tried to get on the group.
Yes.
Which is kind of interesting because basically there is, and it's important to recognise that that's the reality, that if there's anything to do with libraries, the publishers will try to get into it. But as I said, there is nothing about the book chain in this action. So there's a feeling amongst colleagues I've spoken to that that's a non-starter, even though, because the publishers apparently have been communicating to the commission that the Germans will be using this as an opportunity to lobby for ebook legislation, which having spoken to Barbara, I know it's rubbish. But I think that's a bit of a side conversation, but I think that's kind of intriguing about the advocacy environment in Europe, when it tells you that that's how people are thinking. So this OMC group, I don't know what will happen. For example, what will Spain do? Will they come to Laura and say, will you operate on this, or will it go to a minister? Or I don't know anything about it. So it would need to be, we will hear more about that in the next 2 days. But that group would then be basically charged with, it says here, working methods, OMC group, workshops, conference. So we're assuming that there's activities over the period. And this is quite a long period as well, isn't it? 23 to 27, 26. So you would hope that we would be involved, and I say we, NAPLE members would be involved in the actions around that. So that will undoubtedly, as it becomes clearer as to what they're going to be doing on this, I would assume that during the course of this board's tenure, we will have opportunities to be involved in activities.
In the end of it, it's Annex A, some kind of time schedule, and for 2023 it's workshops, 24 OMC group, workshops again, and the conference in 2026.
Right.
So you can see in Annex A the time schedule and different activities.
Because this brings us back to the advocacy question as well, because what we would ideally want is, if we asked ourselves what's the assessment for 2026, if it was something really constructive for promoting and strengthening libraries, bringing together policymakers and libraries. So it's like Joris is looking at library legislation. The leader are looking at libraries. If we want Ireland, we don't have an up-to-date library law, so that might be something positive for us. So we probably need to ask ourselves, through the
through the mechanism of our PL 2030, EGLIDA and NAPLE cooperation, what we want to get in 26, because that will inform, that is advocacy we can do, right? That's basically, I think, the advocacy that we're all comfortable with, rather than the let's change ebook legislation. It still needs to happen, in my opinion, but it's just a different sort of thing. So I think that, Laura, is that, you know, we're talking here about advocacy, and you mentioned at the beginning, I mean, that's kind of
What you're getting yourself into here. Does it make sense?
It makes sense, absolutely, what I hear, because the thing is, because I know you just merged or are cooperating with this EGLIDA and PL 2030, is like, what can we do to connect with them and to work with them in these next years? So because they are in the advocacy path, let's say, how can our activity merge with them in some way? Yeah.
And I think that actually brings us on to then that so we did formally launch our cooperation with PL 2030 and EGLIDA with a press release, I think, in February last year. So, you know, we have agreed at board level that that's what we're going to do. The members have all agreed that it will be interesting. I'm always thinking about the bandwidth we have to do things, right? And not overextending ourselves, because even doing a blog post every month requires us to be active and all this sort of stuff. So it could be really that our cooperation with those two organizations is on the work plan. I'm not sure how much fat we have left to do stuff outside of that, because it seems pretty meaty, you know, like even full stop. So that might be something that if we were looking at the democracy piece as kind of having a NAPLE, I say fence, because people can still come in, I'll have a gate in it. But, you know, we're putting a box around, let's do that, let's make that a NAPLE piece. And then the work plan piece, I think that's already a pretty good sort of, and then we've got our two working groups.
Yeah, but my working group is like it could be very well situated in the democracy. So that could be just like a sub theme or sub
contributor to the democracy.
So I mean, democracy is the higher level, and small languages or whatever we call it is one piece of the cake.
Yeah, that makes sense. What else? Like, what are we not discussing here?
Well, we're thinking democracy is one of the great challenges for our societies nowadays, in which public libraries can play a key role. But I also think, for example, on literacy, reading promotion, literacy, normal literacy, but digital literacy as well, that are also great challenges in which libraries can play a key role. So do we limit ourselves to democracy? That could be a choice. Or do we broaden our scope?
Or is literacy part of our contribution to democracy?
That's a good question, because literacy is something that is sort of at the core, in my view, of what a public library does. So do we need policies? Can we help more, in a sense, in what way can we help the public library? And I feel, so as we all look at this, I think the policies are already, let's put it the other way. I don't get public libraries coming to me and say, I need a policy for legislation. It's already there. Everybody understands that this is the sort of the gate, that this is the area that public libraries work in. So the part with digital literacy is yes, but it's just a question, as I think, for all of us. Is this something that we help public libraries with? Well, I'm not sure.
say one thing.
Yeah.
Each year or each 2-3 years, there is a PISA investigation. That's the reaction. The scores of Belgium and Flanders are disasters.
Yes.
And I think
Who is good? Oh, the
it's a natural habitat for libraries, but is it enough? That's the question.
Yeah. Okay.
Libraries tend to target to the easy groups, I think, if we are critical for ourselves, and I don't think it's always enough. And that's what I mean with policy, is to stimulate them, to help them to target also the weak and the vulnerable.
Is this, and I've got Isabella next, and then Laura's got her hand up just so everyone knows that. But this is reminding me of in Ireland in the last 2 or 3 years, we've just had the government has gone for a 10-year adult literacy strategy, and that's been identified as the difficult part. I got the libraries involved in that, and we've got a central sort of role, and that's a policy I can share with everybody, so you can see how we sort of tackled it. So could that be, that's a good example of the NAPLE information sharing piece,
Be interesting.
and we could sort of, and we've also, and what's interesting is that they put in that strategy, it's an adult literacy, numeracy and digital literacy strategy. So they're trying to tackle those 3 sorts of areas, but in a spectacularly unjoined up piece, the Department of Education is now putting out a literacy strategy. So, because whether that one came from the Department of Higher Education. So anyway, it's not quite joined up, but I do think, that would be interesting to share other people's strategies in the sort of group. So for me, that might fall a little bit into our information sharing, but that could still help you with your objective there.
My question was do we, that could be a choice for the next years, we choose to focus on democracy as a theme, or do we say we pick other societal challenges to be limit ourselves, because you are completely right, our capacity is limited.
No, so I think let's put it on the table, because we don't decide everything today, but I think that's something that we can discuss. So I've got Isabella, Laura, and then Barbara.
I already mentioned it, but I want to bring it here. What makes, for me myself, so rewarding is this information sharing and this broader perspective that I give, what is going on in your countries and what I may expect to happen in mine. And Stuart, you mentioned that you had the problem with hiring the librarians. I'm a sociologist, and for me it's an indicator of the huge change in attitudes. Social, librarians losing their prestige, social prestige. No one wants to work in a library. We have similar situation in Poland, but this is the problem of cultural change. I came to the National Library as a sociologist, as a working sociologist, and I started with the reading, our reading survey, because we have frequent reading survey, and people declare how many books they read during the year, and this Iżytorniczy created our survey, so we have to check the similar statistics are doing well comparing to us, and since 2004, I mean. That's still before, maybe this is e-legislation, something like this, because we have dropping number of people declaring to read, not only to going to the libraries, but declaring to read books. But this is the problem of huge cultural change that is going behind this IT. People do not read books because they have many other sources to fulfill their needs, informational needs, entertainment needs, and so on. And we're still representing the libraries, and now I'm speaking frankly and off the records. For us, this is the problem, because of course libraries are evaluated with the statistics and with borrowers, loans, and so on. And this is the problem. We invest a lot of money into libraries booking for books, for infrastructure, for building new buildings. And this is what I see. I mean, this is the problem, that we need to change the narrative about the libraries, that this is not only about books and reading books and borrowing books, about something more, because we might not be able to attract people again to the libraries. They won't come for the books. And this is the problem of ebooks, because what is fundamental change in remote this platform providing the ebooks is that it reduces the cost of using the physical libraries. Because from the user perspective, going to the library to borrow the books and then bringing it back and watching, minding the time, not to overdue the book, not to pay the fee, is a cost. And having the book from directly on your phone or smartphone reduces the cost immediately and instantly. And this is we won't change the social process, but this really makes we would need a reposition the libraries within 10-20 years, because it's like I'm pretty sure it's like a Gutenberg. Now we have these ebooks platforms, e-audiobooks platforms, and have you noticed that the audiobooks growing up? I mean, we have some shift from textual culture into oral culture again. This is the huge processes.
And I think if Mikkel was here, he'd link between what you're saying and because he's got that Danish kind of hunch that the audio book thing is playing havoc with kids' brains, or doing something different to kids' brains, in the way that
I think that this is also the room for us, just to spot the long practice. Huntington and other thinkers, social thinkers who are spotting the future trends for the world, for the economy. We should spot the future trends for librarianship, for libraries in Europe, in the world, because the dropping statistics for lendings is not the problem only of Polish. I mean, only Dutch statistics are going up, possibly because they integrate the e-lending into the national statistics.
Yeah. So I think, so I want to come to Laura and then to Barbara. I think that's a really good point. I think we might look at how that could fit into that second section in Mikkel's ebook working group,
which is the effects of the, I think you've articulated it really well, and I think it's time we maybe started pushing that in the next 3 years. Laura.
Yes, I wanted to add something about this democracy aspect and the literacy. I think for me, I'm worried about one thing in the digital information world right now, that is the algorithms, because there is a lot of information on the internet or in the digital space, but it is more difficult than ever to find it, because the algorithm is just showing us one type of information depending on what we actually saw yesterday or the day before. So I think there is a place there for public libraries. We already worked on literacy, on digital literacy, and there is this another aspect of how can we help people to don't have that disinformation aspect of society, and how can we help them to find the information they need, and to be able to search on the databases where all the information is. I'm sorry, I'm getting stuck. But I don't know if you understand me right now. Yeah. I think there's a place for us, for public libraries, to develop, and I think we should tackle that because it's very linked with democracy and with this work plan for culture.
So I think it's another interesting thing, because if we go with the fundamental literacy, should we call it basic literacy, which we're reading, and this I think is the other. And that's why, as I mentioned in the Irish strategy, it was quite good that they've gone with adult literacy and they've included digital literacy in the same sort of strategy. So I do think, and I'm just opening my computer to go back to the work plan, that I think, you know, provide access to pluralist and reliable information is the angle. I think, Laura, it's weird, isn't it? In the last, almost like the last 2 months, maybe even in the last 6 weeks, with the release of that Chat GPT, it's almost like you feel like we've gone. Yeah, it's like a massive leap. Something's changed, doesn't it? You can feel something's changed. And previously, we were looking at digital literacy. I've always seen digital skills as the most fundamental piece. Can you use this piece of kit? Then digital literacy. Can you understand what you're getting on it? And now we're talking about digital literacy on steroids when you bring in the algorithm and the and sort of the artificial intelligence piece. It really does feel like a leap forward. I don't know yet what our kind of work in this area looks like, but I do want to acknowledge that that's a really important point. Barbara, do you want to come in?
Yes, what's discussed here is very much reflected in the EU working plan, because it looks at the role of libraries in kind of tackling societal problems, and therefore also in the past, and this is kind of an answer to you, also in the past we have identified our focus for the work, but nevertheless we left ourselves room for whatever comes up in one country, then to check, is that also a topic in the other? And then here comes our strength of the information sharing. Because I think this is really what is so important, that we all probably face the same challenges, and we can learn from each
other and kind of get good ideas from each other, how to tackle these issues. And for me, we do not necessarily need to limit ourselves to say we only deal now with the democracy issue, with that one, because it's broader. It's really about kind of what is the future role of the library, and always in relation to what is going on in society. And I think that then we can kind of combine a lot of issues.
Is there a way that for our next 18 months, for example, of members' meetings, and if we have members' meetings and/or external webinars, that we basically design a program around some of these issues under the umbrella of the work plan? Because that could enable us to get into literacy, digital literacy, algorithm, and you know, I don't think that will overstretch our bandwidth, because this is in our business as usual sort of lane, and it just means that we need to get the good speakers, as someone said, and the interesting sort of speakers. Elizabeth.
I want to come back to where we in a way
started the discussion we had. And we talked about how politicians want to limit what the libraries does when the politicians or groups like you have in Ireland want to restrict parts of the library's content, either its books or its programs, activities, and so on. So what we talked about is how we can stay strong against these forces that wants to reduce the library to a very narrow perspective. So when we think about the library, we think that the library is neutral in a way. Every opinion has its size. You should not do censorship. You're allowed to see offensive things to make up your own opinion, and that's what I'm reading into this about democracy, that the library should in the future still be the place where you can see stuff that maybe offends some people, but still you have the right to take part of that kind of content, unless it's against a law like child pornography. A library should be able to provide everything.
It's an institution of democracy that trusts the people
to make their own judgment. And alongside that is what we have talked about, how to see the difference between propaganda and facts.
Yeah.
We have to teach people how to distinguish between this is like the anti-vax conspiracy and this is the medical facts. And I think those two things go alongside each other.
I see where you're coming from. Yeah.
This is also going back to algorithms. It's a question of competences of librarians. As we saw, the Chat GPT started in December. Everybody was surprised because nobody knew that it's stepping up so rapidly, and the people who are informationally or media illiterate could have a problem with using some kind of technologies because you ask Chat GPT, give me a summary of Great Gatsby, and you get the final piece of document. You get what the Chat GPT thinks it's the best thing. And the people saw that text as, oh, great, I have a summary, I don't have to do my homework. And it's not 100% that thing. And especially it could be a problematic for a certain sensitive themes. Ukraine war. If you, who's the bad guy here? Is the Ukraine, is Russian? It depends on algorithms, and when the Google steps up with his bot, I don't know what will happen. So this will be a great how to say, a problem for librarians. How to educate so fast ourselves, our colleagues, to cope with artificial intelligence.
I would love to see us have this as a bit of a strand. It goes a little bit to what Isabella said earlier on, and it touches on our previous sort of webinar. For me, this is a real problem for Irish libraries, is like, how do I recruit people that are going to be able to deal with all of this in the coming years in order to be able to help our users to defend democracy, etc., etc. And, you know, in our new strategy, I've got a couple of targets on this, but rewriting the competencies for library job descriptions gets me involved with unions, gets me involved. It's like it suddenly becomes a very gnarly. So I spoke to my colleagues in my organization. They said, yeah, this is quite good, but this is something that's going to take you 4 years, if not 5 years, to be able to change. And I will start the work and I will do it, but what's ChatGPT going to be like in like 1 year?
Yeah,
you know, it's pretty crazy. And in the meantime, I've got job descriptions that basically look, some of them, like they're recruiting libraries for the 1980s. So it's like,
I want to add one thing about this simple group. Last year, when I conducted this big research in Poland on this idea whether we should follow the media library, maybe more computers and more gaming, and is it a go to right direction? And one of the conclusions was that this is a problem of the lack of competences among librarians. They oriented towards the books. They like to read in books. That is gaming and computers. It's they don't like this field because they don't feel comfortable with. And they have offer only for children because they are young and uneducated, and seniors because they are digitally excluded. And they do not have competences to be a partner for adults, for teenagers, because they are better than they. This is the problem. Not only to recruit, you know, to find the people to work in the library, but to find the people with the competences enough to be a partner and really to teach them to have a message for adults. Not for seniors and not for primary school.
It's like Yoris said, doing the difficult
groups,
work.
not the easy groups. I mean, easy groups are easy, but what can we offer for the rest of the society, not for the seniors and children?
I think this comes back to the changing role of the the public library as an institution, but also as the librarian, because sort of in the old way, then the librarian would be somebody who would know everything, and this is cycling into this new field. And I think in the new way, the librarian or the community librarian, you don't have to know everything. You just need to be able to connect people. So in that sense, it would be quite logical that you would ask a teenager to educate on behalf of the public library to what is this game, or what does the chat GPT do. So the changing role is that the library would be more like a platform or a place where people could meet and educate us, but it would not, in my sense, or it would not be that the public library and the librarian would know everything. But this is
still requires a bit of a switch.
Yeah, definitely.
Kind of changing role.
Yeah.
More facilitating.
Yes.
Your public.
Yeah.
And I have very nice changing Wikipedia, Wikipedia.
Yeah.
It's cooperation between Wikipedia and library world.
Yeah.
It's a pretty strong something towards digital and connecting local communities.
I think there's been, obviously, the funny thing about being a librarian is that you're always constantly asking yourself, why aren't we, how do we change? We kind of forget sometimes the good things that we do, but we're a very self-critical profession. So it's probably what makes us quite good in some respects. So yeah, the changing role of the librarian, I think, has been in every single conference I've been to for the last 30 years.
Yeah. Right, and some special project in the Netherlands, public spaces. All partners who are mainly working in public and protecting the public space have manifest and working together to claim the public space, but also to reclaim. So in history, the private domain became bigger, public space. And in that case, I think as a library branch, you have to search allies to protect public spaces and to.
It's a little bit like that number 31 in the work plan. But look, Elizabeth, you got your hand up. We're coming to the end of our time. I don't know if they're going to come and kick us out, but do you want to come in with a?
I visited the public library in Stockholm. Is inside the shopping mall, and they've been doing a lot of different program activities and involving all the society, and have been very open to all the new trends and everything. And the two librarians that we met and talked with, they said, we have to stop and think, and we have to start to think, what is librarianship? Because they the feeling they had was that they reach out the hand to that organization, to that kind of function, and in the end, the library is not longer a library. It's some kind of mishmash of everything. So they try to, what they're doing now is try to make some kind of boundary. What is librarianship? What should the librarians work with? And how can we bring in other NGOs or other people to do the other stuff that's outside the fence?
Yeah.
And they talk about explore things together with an NGO or a specific person, but the librarian is still a librarian, but the space can be used by many other.
I think, I think there is a day. I mean, you've only got to look at COVID, the amount of things that libraries are doing
in COVID, that we could run into a situation where we are too many things. But look, Barbara, I think you've been capturing a lot of this. So what I suggest is So we can obviously and hopefully will continue to discuss this over a drink and over some food. But unfortunately, you guys can't come.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow we'll do it twice.
But what we'll do is, I think the next step for us is to hear what this conference has to say, because there's loads of really interesting things on the agenda tomorrow that are relevant. And then we've got all of this discussion to bring into Wednesday morning. And then what I think we'll do is we'll take stock and see what proposal the board can make to the members as to our work plan for the next few years. So this was really good. I know it's not finished yet, we've just started, but thanks for everyone in the room. Thanks for everybody remotely. We'll see our Spanish colleagues tomorrow. Mirko, you're going to be very welcome in our group for the next 6 months or longer. So we're looking forward to having Finland involved. Ulla, nice to see you. And we'll be back in touch. So thank you very much. And I think we can leave now. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Anna is our leader to get down to town. People who want to